Hello, my dear adventurers. It's Fox. Wow, it feels good to be back. Welcome on into the tavern. Take a seat. Order some ale. It's on the house. Tonight, I'm telling you, yes you, everything you need to know about Dungeons and Dragons to join your first ever game. Maybe you just want to make your own cheeky character and flirt with the idea of a one-shot. Or even if you just wanted to understand a bit more of what I'm referencing when you're watching my D&D themed videos. Like, I've had so many people ask me what on earth a tiefling is when I mention one in my stories, or how to actually play D&D and get to experience an adventure of their own. So that's what we'll be doing. Oh, and I know I titled this video D&D for Dummies, but I want to make it clear, I don't think you're dumb for not knowing any of this stuff. I just happen to like those old school guidebooks. And if you want to support the channel and get access to over 130 stories, ad-free, and with early access to my future videos, consider checking out my Patreon, linked down in the description. But for now, get cozy by the fire, get your dice ready for some lucky rolls, and let's begin. There's a moment in every Dungeons and Dragons session, usually somewhere around the 3rd hour, after the snacks have run out and you've been rolling badly all night, where you look around the table and realize you've been pretending to be an elf for longer than you've seen your family this week. And you're loving it. Your wizard friend is yelling at the bard for trying to seduce a chicken. The dungeon master is 100% silently judging all of you behind a cardboard screen. One of your mates has rolled a 1, and now their character is hanging upside down from a tree. But this is the game. This is what people mean when they say D&D. And if you've spent the last however many years hearing about it from your weirdest and also most charismatic friends, or watching clips online of grown adults cry over the end of a 3-year story arc. Honestly, even if you've watched something like Stranger Things, and you've thought, okay, but what is it actually? This video is for you. I'm going to walk you through everything. What the game is, how it works, what the dice actually do, why people care so much about getting their original characters just right. We'll talk about armor class, what the heck a saving throw is, and how a group of friends, or even strangers, can sit at a table for 5 hours and create a story that they will, swear to God, still be talking about and referencing a decade from now. We're going to cover character creation, combat, spells, all of it. By the end of this, you should understand enough to either join your first game, or at least politely explain to your friend that, no, you still don't want to play, but at least now you'll know what they're talking about when they won't shut up about it. Either way, you win. Let's start at the top. I'm going to cover basics first, before diving into real examples and how all these rules and ideas translate in an actual game. So Dungeons and Dragons, as a concept, is sort of a strange thing to explain. It sits at this intersection of a board game, a writing exercise, an improv class, and a group therapy session. The shortest version is this. It's a game where a group of people sit around a table, or increasingly these days a Discord call, and tell a collaborative story about a group of adventurers who they assume the role of in a fantasy world. There's some nuance to this. Not every D&D game takes place in a medieval fantasy setting. Some are steampunk, sci-fi, or Lovecraftian themed even, among many others. But for simplicity's sake, let's start there, because it's definitely the most common one. One person, called the Dungeon Master, runs the game, and by extension, the world. They describe what's happening at any given moment. They play all the non-player characters, like the shopkeepers and villains and weird old guys in taverns. And they decide what challenges the group faces. They're in charge of driving the story forward narratively, based on the actions of the other actual players at the table. Everyone else assumes the role of a single character. A warrior, a wizard, a rogue, a druid, whatever they want. And when something uncertain happens, when a character tries to do something that could fail, dice get rolled to determine the outcome and severity of the failure, or to which degree the action succeeds. Some campaigns take months, or can even go on for years. But there's also one-shots. A one-shot is a single self-contained D&D session, usually 3 to 5 hours, that tells a complete story start to finish. You make a character at the beginning, or come prepared to one with an existing character you've made. Play through one adventure, and the story wraps up by the end of the night. It's the easiest way for you as a beginner to try the game without committing to a long campaign. I'd say most people's first few D&D experiences are one-shots, not a full campaign. That's the basic gist, but what makes it actually interesting, and what I think trips up people who've only ever played video games, is that there are no real rules about what you're allowed to try. In most video games, you're kind of trained to realize, oh, if there's a stack of crates blocking this path, I can't go this way. This is the game's way of telling me, find another solution, even though logically you should be able to just move the obstacle. But in Dungeons and Dragons, you can attempt anything. You can try to seduce the dragon. You can try to convince the king that you're his long-lost son. You can try to leap from a chandelier and stab a guy in the eye. The Dungeon Master will tell you what you need to roll, and the dice will decide if you pulled it off. So in a very real sense, Dungeons and Dragons is a game about asking, what if I just did the thing and then watching what happens? I'm trying to get across this idea that it's such a dynamic and changing game, and that even though there is usually a big bad villain of the campaign and an overall story to be told, the ways in which you navigate it are numberless. Now, the Dungeon Master, often called the DM, is doing a lot of heavy lifting. If the players are the actors, the DM is the director, the writer, the lighting crew, and every other person on set. They've usually prepared a story arc, an adventure they want the group to go on, as well as a basic initial premise to get the story going. Maybe there's a missing prince. Maybe a town is being haunted. Maybe a god has gone insane and started turning people into thralls. The DM will have their notes, a handful of maps for the different locations and settings. Definitely a list of monster stats and a vague idea of how the night will go. And then the players show up and ruin all of it. That's my attempt at a joke, but it's not entirely false. Because the players will always do something the DM didn't plan for. They'll skip the dungeon that the DM spent hours planning by somehow befriending the villain, or rolling really well on a deception attempt. They'll, set the inn on fire and ride off into the night, A good DM rolls with this, and a great DM makes you feel like the chaos was part of the plan all along. If this sounds intimidating, that's because it is. Being a DM is genuinely a skill. Far be it from me to tell people what to do. But if it's your first foray into D&D, my honest advice is don't try to DM your first game ever. But playing as a regular character, what we call a player character, or PC, is much more accessible than people think. You don't need to be a great actor. You don't need to do voices, though some people do. And I think it makes the game a lot more fun and breaks that socially awkward barrier very quickly. You just need to be willing to say what your character does, and then react to whatever situation comes next. Okay, let's talk about dice. Because if you've ever seen photos of a D&D table, you've seen the dice, and I wouldn't blame you for being confused. There are 7 of them in a standard set. They're named by how many sides they have, with a little d in front of the number. So a 6-sided die is a d6. A 4-sided die is a d4. The set goes d4, d6, d8, d10, d12, d20, and a percentile die, which is technically another d10 but with 10s marked on it. You roll it with the regular d10 to get a number between 1 and 100. Out of all of these, one die is the most iconic and what most people will recognize as being the face of D and D. It's the 20-sided one, the D20. This is the die you're rolling almost every single time something in the game is uncertain. It looks like a little crystal ball with numbers on it, and it carries the emotional weight of every session ever played. Anytime someone's trying to pull off something mental, or trying to learn some bit of info that'll shake up the night, or even just checking to see if they can climb a wall or persuade someone to do something, they're rolling a D20. The basic system, what's called the core mechanic, works like this. When your character tries to do something that could fail, you roll the D20 and you add a number based on how good your character is at that thing, and you compare the total to a target number. If you meet or beat the target, you succeed. If you don't, you fail. The DM might describe the failure as funny or tragic or somewhere in between, depending on the situation. But the dice have spoken. I'll be giving some actual examples to really contextualize this and make it make more sense, just once I've established the basics. There are 2 big special results on the D20 you should know about. If you roll a 1, that's a critical failure, sometimes called a natural one. The word natural in D&D parlance just means the number on the die before you add anything. A natural one means you've rolled the worst possible result, and traditionally, the table will gasp or laugh or even groan because something has just gone deeply wrong for your character. Picture your rogue trying to disarm a trap on a chest that's holding the antidote your friend needs in the next 10 minutes, or they die. Being a rogue, you should have a relatively easy time with chests and this sort of stuff. All you need to roll is a 9 to succeed. But sadly, you roll a natural one and critically fail. The DM could say something like you're so nervous that your hand slips, the mechanism clicks, and the chest hisses out a cloud of poison, afflicting you as well now. So both you and your friend are in a real bad spot now. There's also a fun thing some DMs do with natural ones on perception or investigation checks. Instead of just saying, you don't see anything, they'll confidently tell you something that's completely wrong. Like, you roll a 1 to inspect a suspicious chest in a dungeon, and the DM tells you it looks perfectly safe when it absolutely is not. You walk forward and trigger the trap. On the other end, if you roll a 20, that's a natural 20, a critical hit, the best possible roll. That's where all those viral clips of people high-fiving or yelling out come from. Usually, it's because a player wanted to do something very ambitious that should by all means fail. And the DM has set a very high target number to meet, but they got lucky and rolled a natural 20. The DM, defeated, has to describe something incredibly cool. Or maybe they'll hand over the reins to you and let you describe exactly how you want to finish off an enemy in style. In combat, a natural 20 means you don't just hit, you hit really hard, and you usually deal extra damage. Outside of combat, the rules are a bit more loose. But most DMs will let a nat 20 produce some kind of memorable, ridiculous success. Say your bard is in a noble's court, trying to convince a hostile duke that the man being executed in the square outside is innocent. The target number to meet is 25, because the duke has already made up his mind, and even with your bard's silver tongue, you'd normally have no chance. You roll a natural 20, add your modifiers, more on those later, and you blow past it. The DM has to lean into it at that point. He says that the duke calls for the execution to be halted, while he hears you out, and the whole arc of the story bends because of one die. There's also a concept called advantage and disadvantage. If something is in your favor, like you're sneaking up on someone who hasn't seen you, the DM might say you have advantage on your roll, which means you roll 2d20s and take the higher one, improving your chances. Kind of like bad luck protection. If something is working against you, like you're trying to shoot a bow while underwater, you have disadvantage, and you roll 2d20s and take the lower one. That's it. Not too complicated. Just, are things looking good or bad for you, and roll accordingly. Now we have to talk about target numbers, because I've been mentioning that, but I haven't actually established them properly. This is where AC and DC come in. And these are two terms you will hear constantly. They mean almost the same thing, just for slightly different situations. DC stands for difficulty class. It's the target number for any general check that isn't an attack. If you want to climb a slippery wall, the DM might set the DC at 15. So you roll your D20, add whatever your athletics modifier is, maybe +3, and if your total hits 15 or above, you climb it. The numbers tend to follow a rough scale. A DC of 10 is something an average person could do most of the time. A DC of 15 is hard, 20 is heroic. 25 is essentially a feat of legend. 30 is the kind of thing your friends or players will still remember years after the roll. The DM picks the DC based on how hard the thing is, what character is trying to accomplish this, and then you roll. Like the DC for a half-orc fighter or barbarian trying to lift something heavy will be lower than if your halfling cleric tried to do the same. AC stands for armor class. It's the same idea, but specifically for getting hit in combat. Every creature in the game has an AC, which represents how hard they are to land a successful blow on. A regular guy in plain clothes might have an AC of 9. A guy in chainmail with a shield might have 16. A dragon might have 19. A magical creature wreathed in protective spells could have 22. When you attack, you roll a d20, add your attack bonus, and try to meet or beat the target's AC. If you do, you hit, and then you roll separate dice to figure out how much damage you do. If you don't, you miss, and the DM gets to gleefully describe your sword bouncing off some lizard's hide. Or if it's a really bad roll, maybe they'll say something like, "You trip and completely miss," drawing the ridicule of the enemy you're facing. So in shorthand, AC and DC are just target numbers. Both of them are checked the same way, by rolling a d20 and adding the relevant modifier and seeing if your total hits the target. The only difference is what the target represents and which modifier you add. Armor class is what you're trying to meet when you attack something. And you add your attack modifier, which is tied to your weapon or your spell. DC is the target for everything else, and the modifier you add depends on what your character is trying to do. Climbing a wall, you add your athletics. Picking a lock, you add your sleight of hand. Convincing a guard your attacks collector, you add your persuasion. Your character sheet lists all of these, and the DM will tell you which one applies if it's not obvious. There's one more flavor of D20 roll you need to know about, and it's called a saving throw. Saving throws come up when something happens to your character that you have to resist. A wizard casts a fireball at you, so you make a saving throw to dive out of the way and take less damage. If, let's say, a snake bites you, you make a saving throw to resist the poison. As another example, let's say someone tries to magically charm you. You make a saving throw to keep your free will. The structure is identical. Roll a d20, add a modifier, try to beat a target. The only difference is that the modifier is tied to a specific stat, depending on the kind of effect you're resisting. So let's talk about stats. Every D&D character has 6 core ability scores. These are the building blocks of who your character is, mechanically. They are strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. People abbreviate these as the first 3 letters in each word. Each one usually ranges from 3, which is essentially non-functional, to 20, which is the peak of capability, unless you have some really rare item, like a belt of giant strength or something, which can push you higher. Most player characters fall somewhere between 8 and 16 at the start, depending on how you've built your character. The score itself isn't what you add to your rolls, though. What you add is called the modifier, and you calculate it by subtracting 10 and dividing by 2, rounded down. A score of 10 or 11 is a modifier of 0. A score of 14 is a +2. A score of 8 is a -1. You don't have to memorize the math, by the way. I hate math, so don't be discouraged by this part. The character sheet does it for you, and you literally just need to do some very simple addition, like adding your +3 modifier to your roll of 17. But I'm just explaining this because it helps to know what's going on, in case you ever wondered how you get your modifiers. Let's talk more about each core ability. Strength is what you'd expect. It's how hard you hit, how much you can lift, how well you can shove a guy off a cliff. Dexterity is your nimbleness. Things like aim, reflexes, balance, sneaking. Constitution is your toughness, how much abuse your body can take, your stamina, your hit points. Intelligence is book smarts, what you know, what you can figure out, how good you are at arcane magic. Wisdom, on the other hand, is street smarts and intuition. Noticing things, sensing motives, perceiving danger. Plus, it powers a lot of nature and divine magic. Charisma is force of personality. How well can you lie, persuade, intimidate, or perform? Players sometimes mix up intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, and the easiest way to remember it is the old joke. Intelligence is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad. Charisma is selling tomato-based fruit salad to a stranger. Each of these 6 stats is the foundation for skills. Skills are specific things you can be trained in. Athletics is a strength skill. Stealth is a dexterity skill. Perception is wisdom. Persuasion is charisma. Arcana is intelligence. There are about 18 skills in total, and your character is proficient in some of them based on their class and background. Being proficient just means you add an extra bonus called your proficiency bonus on top of the relevant ability modifier when you roll. So if you're, let's say, a streetwise urchin who grew up pickpocketing nobles in city alleyways, you would be proficient in stealth. And let's say you have a dexterity of 16, so your stealth roll adds your +3 from dexterity, and your proficiency bonus, which starts at +2 at low levels, for a total of +5. This is the part where I want to assure you that nobody, not even people who have played for years, holds all of this perfectly in their head. The character sheet does the work. You write the numbers down once when you make your character, and then when the DM asks for a stealth check, you look at your character sheet and go, oh, okay, I rolled a 14 plus my 5 dexterity modifier and +2 for my proficiency in stealth. That's 21. Did it work? Am I hidden? And the DM says yes or no, and the game continues. Speaking of character sheets, let's actually talk about making a character. This is where a lot of new players get stuck, because it feels like the choices are infinite, and they kind of are, but the structure of it is pretty simple. To make a character, you pick a species, a class, and a background. Those 3 things, plus your stats, define 90% of who your character is mechanically. Personality, name, backstory, voice, all of that, that's all stuff you get to invent on top for flavor and fun. Species, which the game used to call race, and which most people still casually call race, even though the official terminology has shifted, is what kind of creature your character is. There are dozens of options across the various rulebooks, but let me walk you through the classics and a few of the more fantastical picks, so you've got a feel for the range. Humans are the most adaptable species in the game. In the lore, they're the most populous and widespread people in most D&D settings, found in every climate, every culture, every kingdom. They have shorter lifespans than the other species, usually less than a century, which the lore frames as a kind of urgency that drives them to build, conquer, and explore faster than longer-lived peoples. They're the most popular pick for first characters, because they're a clean slate and you can make a human anything. Some people might tell you, oh, that's so boring, picking a human for a fantasy game, but don't let that discourage you. I think it can be incredibly rewarding playing someone who, in the face of insurmountable odds and fantastical creatures, perseveres through their human spirit and sheer will. Elves are tall and ancient. They can live for 700 years or more, which warps how they think about time. To an elf, a human's entire life is shorter than their adolescence. They don't sleep the way other species do. Instead, they enter a meditative state called a trance for 4 hours a night and dream while semi-conscious. The lore splits them into different lineages. High elves are scholarly and the most magically inclined of the elven races, often living in old, civilized realms with strong arcane traditions. Even the non-spellcasting classes, which we'll cover in a bit, get a bonus spell as a mechanical reflection of their inherent magical affinity. Wood elves are reclusive and forest-dwelling. They're a secretive bunch and have a bonus to their movement speed. They also get a feature called Mask of the Wild, which lets them try to hide even when only lightly obscured by natural phenomena. Drow are the dark elves, with skin the color of obsidian or charcoal and white hair. They live in vast underground cities in the Underdark, in a violent matriarchal society ruled by priestesses of the spider goddess Lolth. Most outsiders fear them on sight, and a few brave drow rebel against their own culture and seek a different life on the surface. I love drow, they're pretty awesome. Mechanically, elves have proficiency in perception, advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and they can't be magically put to sleep at all, which makes sense since they have that trance ability. They also have dark vision, which lets them see in dim light up to 60 feet as if it were bright. Dwarves are short and broad, a very hardy folk. Their whole identity revolves around their craft and the deep places of the world. The lore puts them in massive underground kingdoms carved into mountains, with cities that have stood for thousands of years and forges that have never gone cold. They live around 350 years, which means dwarven culture takes the long view on everything. Family names are important to them, and clan histories get memorized, and grudges get passed down through generations, which makes for some fun, quirky backstories. Your dwarf character might still be holding on to a fight their great-grandmother started. Mechanically, they have advantage on saving throws against poison and resistance to poison damage as a reflection of their hardy underground physiology. They have dark vision out to 60 feet, so they can see in dim caves and tunnels, and they get a feature called Stone Cunning that makes them experts at recognizing underground construction, traps in masonry, and the history of stonework. And they come standard with proficiency in weapons their culture is known for, like warhammers, battle axes, and hand axes, plus their choice of one type of artisan's tools, which is usually smith's tools or mason's tools. Halflings are small, cheerful, and very much inspired, like so obviously inspired, by the hobbits of Lord of the Rings, since D&D's creator Gary Gygax was a Tolkien fan, and the early game borrowed the look and feel directly. In fact, the original name for them in D&D was hobbits, until a word about copyright was had, and the name got changed to halflings. They prefer to live quiet, settled lives in pastoral communities, and value comfort, food, family, and a good story by the fire. and they live around 150 years. Mechanically, halflings have the lucky trait, which lets them re-roll a natural one on any attack roll, ability check, or saving throw and take the new result. And they can move through the space of larger creatures, which is incredibly useful in a fight. There are two main sub-races in the lore. Lightfoot halflings are sneakier and more wanderlust-driven, often becoming rogues or scouts. Stout halflings are said to have a bit of dwarven blood somewhere in their ancestry, and are tougher, with additional poison resistance. Gnomes are intensely curious little guys. The lore presents them as inventors, tinkerers, illusionists, and burrow dwellers, with a love of jokes and weird little gadgets. They live around 350 to 500 years, longer than humans but shorter than elves, and gnomish culture tends toward exuberant creativity. They have two main sub-races. Rock gnomes are tinkers and engineers, building clockwork toys and small mechanical curiosities. Forest gnomes are more secretive, magical, and tied to woodland creatures, capable of speaking with small animals naturally. Gnomes have dark vision also, are small in size like halflings, and have a trait called gnome cunning, which gives them advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws against magic. Dragonborn are humanoid dragons, tall, broad-shouldered, scaled, and proud, with draconic ancestry, tied to one of the 10 classic dragon types, split between the chromatic dragons like red, blue, green, black, and white, and the metallic dragons like gold, silver, bronze, brass, and copper. The lore varies by setting, but most worlds have an ancient dragonborn empire, somewhere in their past that fell long ago. A modern dragonborn often feel that lost heritage is a weight. It's something you could tie into your backstory if you want. Their scales come in a color that matches their dragon ancestor, and they have an innate breath weapon they can use a couple of times per rest, which fires a cone or line of damage that matches their lineage. A red dragonborn breathes fire, a blue dragonborn breathes lightning, a silver dragonborn breathes cold, and so on. They also have resistance to the damage type their breath deals. Tieflings are humans whose ancestry, somewhere back along the bloodline, intersected with a fiend. The most common version of the lore traces it to an ancient infernal pact made by a long-dead empire called Baal Turath, where the human nobility collectively struck a deal with Asmodeus, the archdevil and ruler of the 9 hells. In exchange for power, every descendant of those bloodlines would forever carry the mark of the bargain. That means horns, a tail, sometimes hooves, sometimes solid-colored eyes with no whites, and sometimes skin in unusual shades like red, purple, or deep blue. Tieflings face a lot of casual prejudice in most settings, since people assume the worst when they see someone with horns walking into a tavern. Mechanically, they have resistance to fire damage, dark vision, and a small package of innate spells they can cast a limited number of times per day, with the specific spells depending on which infernal lineage they pick. Half-elves and half-orcs were the classic mixed ancestry options in earlier rules, and most tables still play them even though the 2024 rules folded mixed ancestries into a more flexible system. Half-elves combine the longer lifespan and grace of elves with the adaptability and ambition of humans, often ending up as wanderers who don't fit in completely, a foot in both worlds but belonging fully to neither. Half-orcs blend human and orcish ancestry, ending up taller and stronger than most humans, with a feature called relentless endurance that lets them drop to 1 hit point instead of 0 once per long rest, which is a cool little survival mechanism. They also have savage attacks, which adds an extra damage die on critical hits. Beyond the classics, there are dozens of more fantastical options in the supplemental books. You'll rarely encounter people playing these races at beginner tables, but I guess just to show some options, like the Aasimar, who are descended from Celestials and have angelic ancestry, with the ability to reveal radiant wings and channel divine energy. Goliaths are 7-foot-tall mountain people with stone-grey skin who shrug off cold and physical damage. Turtles are bipedal turtles with thick natural armor, peaceful philosophies. They have a tendency to wander the world for the joy of it. Tabaxi are cat people, agile and curious, often working as explorers and scouts. And there are stranger options too, like Arakokra, who are full-on bird people, satyrs, fairies, sea folk called tritons, and centaurs. Every species gives your character some little mechanical perks, along with thematic abilities tied to their lore. None of these bonuses are world-shaking, so don't feel pressured to go one way or another for purely gameplay reasons. But they do nudge your character in a flavor direction, give you something special to do in certain scenarios. Just make the species feel like it actually matters. Choosing your class is the big one. Class is what you do, like a real-life job, but obviously so much better. There are 12 official classes in the current edition of the game. Let me run through them quickly, because this matters a lot. I'd say it's the most important thing about making your first character. Because yes, it's a key part of combat. But a lot of times your class also defines how you interface and interact with the other bits of the campaign. Like the dialogue and finding out information, uncovering legends and secrets, and so many other non-fighting related things. Like your big beefy half-orc barbarian is much more likely to succeed in intimidating a guard through speech than your average lanky wizard. But the wizard could much more easily glean some very crucial information from a tome you found in some old crypt, compared to the barbarian. Oh, and I won't cover every single subclass, since there's too many. But I'll mention some very distinct ones, to just kind of show off the variety you can have within one class. You never need to feel like you're locked into just the basic archetype or flavor of your chosen class. The fighter is a martial specialist who can use any armor and any weapon in the game. They get more attacks per turn than almost anyone else. And they have second wind, which lets them heal themselves a bit during combat. Subclasses are called martial archetypes. The champion is the simple, classic flavor of the fighter, the most vanilla basically. And they can score critical hits on a roll of 19 or 20 instead of just a 20, with that range expanding even further at higher levels. The Battlemaster learns combat maneuvers, tactical tricks like tripping enemies, disarming them or counter-attacking when they miss. Fueled by a pool of superiority dice, which are basically charges they spend to pull off the trick. adding the rolled die as bonus damage on top. The Eldritch Knight blends sword fighting with arcane magic by learning wizard spells alongside their weapon training, and eventually being able to teleport short distances mid-combat. The Psi Warrior channels raw psionic energy through their weapons, hurling enemies around with telekinetic strikes. There's even a very cool samurai subclass, if you like that flavor. The Barbarian is a melee powerhouse, built around a feature called Rage. When raging, they deal extra damage on melee attacks and take half damage from most physical hits. They have the highest hit points of any class and typically skip heavy armor, since their toughness comes from raw constitution. They can also throw caution to the wind with reckless attack, which gives them advantage on melee attacks at the cost of being easier to hit themselves. Subclasses are called primal paths. The path of the Berserker leans into just pure unhinged violence, letting them make a bonus attack while raging through a feature called Frenzy, basically getting an extra swing every turn at the cost of physical exhaustion afterward. The path of the Totem Warrior channels the spirit of a chosen animal to reshape the whole feel of your barbarian. The Bear Totem makes you resistant against every damage type except for psychic damage. The Wolf Totem turns you into a battlefield enabler who hands out advantage to your melee allies. The Eagle Totem makes you absurdly mobile, letting you dash as a bonus action, an imposing disadvantage on enemies trying to hit you when you run past them. The path of the Storm Herald wraps the Barbarian in a primal aura while raging, with the flavor of a scorching desert, a raging sea, or a frozen tundra. The desert aura burns nearby creatures with fire damage every turn, so it's worth giving your friends some space. The sea aura strikes a chosen enemy with lightning, and the tundra aura grants temporary hit points to nearby allies, turning the Barbarian into a walking shield for the whole party. The Paladin is a holy warrior who blends combat with divine magic. Their signature move is Divine Smite, where they channel a burst of radiant energy through their weapon mid-swing, basically exploding the target in holy fire. They can also heal allies pretty effectively. Every Paladin is sworn to an oath, which acts as their subclass. Devotion is the classic Shining Knight. The Ancients is a fey-flavored guardian of the natural world. Vengeance is when a Paladin is sworn to avenge someone or something. And the Oathbreaker subclass is a Paladin who has abandoned their oath, usually after a tragedy, and starts drawing power from somewhere darker. It's a bit of a running joke that the lawful good Paladin in your party is statistically the most likely person at the table to commit a war crime. The Ranger is a wilderness expert who fights with a bow or two weapons up close, and serves as the party's tracker and scout, the one who finds the trail and spots the ambush coming. This is the class you pick if you've always wanted to be Legolas from Lord of the Rings. Their signature spell is Hunter's Mark, which lets them magically tag a target to deal extra damage on every hit. They also get Pass Without Trace, one of the best stealth spells in the game, capable of letting a party of clanking knights and noisy wizards sneak past a guard like ghosts. Subclasses include the Hunter, a pure combat specialist, the Beast Master, who fights alongside a magical animal companion, the Gloom Stalker, an ambush predator who's invisible to anything seeing in the dark and devastating in the first round of a fight. The coolest subclass for the Ranger, in my personal opinion, is the Monster Slayer, who specializes in hunting the most dangerous things in the world, like fiends, undead, fae, aberrations, and can magically read a target's defenses to figure out its weaknesses. Then you have your magic users. Quick note before we get into them. You're going to hear me say cantrips sometimes. Cantrips are the smallest spells in the game. They don't use spell slots, they don't run out, and every caster has a handful of them. Think of them as the magic user's equivalent of a basic weapon swing. But back to it. The wizard is the classic, bookish, studious, highly intelligent, and a master of spellcasting. Wizards keep a personal spellbook, and unlike other casters, they can permanently grow their repertoire by finding scrolls or copying spells from other wizards' spellbooks, which means a high-level wizard who has been adventuring for a while can end up with a frankly absurd library of options. They have the largest spell list in the game and access to every school of magic, from fireballs to mind control to teleportation, and they can prepare a different selection of spells each day to suit whatever the party is about to walk into. Subclasses are usually built around a specific school. An evoker is the classic blaster who throws fireballs and lightning bolts. An abjurer specializes in protective magic and gets a regenerating magical ward that absorbs hits for them. A diviner can, literally, manipulate fate by rolling 2d20s at the start of the day, banking those numbers and replacing any future roll, theirs or someone else's, with one of those banked dice. The sorcerer is also a full caster, but their magic is innate rather than studied. It comes from a bloodline or some cosmic event that left a mark on them. Like maybe they had a dragon ancestor centuries back, or a freak accident had exposed them to raw chaotic magic at a young age. Sorcerers know fewer spells than wizards, and can't change them up daily the way a wizard can. But they have a unique resource called sorcery points that fuels metamagic. Metamagic lets them tweak their spells on the fly. Twinned spell lets them cast a single target spell at 2 targets at once. Subtle spell lets them cast without speaking or gesturing, which means they can throw a fireball while tied up and gagged. Very useful stuff. Subclasses are called sorceress origins. So using the example from earlier, the draconic bloodline gives them dragon-flavored perks like resistance to a damage type, scaly armor that boosts their AC, and eventually actual dragon wings. The wild magic sorcerer rolls on a chaos table whenever they cast, with results ranging from a harmless puff of color to accidentally casting fireballs centered on themselves. The aberrant sorcerer has psionic powers from some Lovecraftian horror and can speak telepathically and warp their body. The warlock class had made a pact with a powerful entity, like a fiend, an archfey, or some eldritch horror from beyond the stars. They get magic in exchange for serving that patron. Mechanically, they have very few spell slots, but those slots recharge on a short rest, and they always cast at full power. Their iconic move is Eldritch Blast, a beam of force damage that scales up as they level, and they pick up permanent magical perks called Eldritch Invocations along the way, which lets you customize your warlock with things like seeing through magical darkness, casting certain spells at will, or supercharging Eldritch Blast itself. Warlocks also choose a Pact boon. Pact of the Blade lets them summon a magical weapon out of thin air. Pact of the Chain gives them a special familiar like an imp. And Pact of the Tome gives them a Book of Shadows packed with extra spells. Subclasses are called otherworldly patrons. The Great Old One is a Lovecraftian cosmic horror that has noticed you from across the void and is slowly altering your mind in exchange for power. Your warlock gets telepathy with nearby creatures, eventually becoming resistant to psychic damage and reflecting it back at whoever dealt it. And at the highest levels can permanently dominate a humanoid's mind. The Archfey is a powerful lord or lady of the Fey courts, granting whimsical, dangerous magic. They can charm or frighten everyone in a small area around them, turn invisible and teleport when they take damage, and at high levels drag a single victim into a hallucinatory, waking nightmare. The Hexblade is bound to a sentient weapon from the Shadowfell, and is the go-to pick for warlocks who want to fight up close. Their signature feature, Hex Warrior, lets them use charisma instead of strength or dexterity for weapon attacks. So for example, a Hexblade with the Pact of the Blade boon essentially becomes a magical swordsman fueled by sheer force of personality. And if you choose the Genie Patron for your warlock, you bind yourself to a noble genie of one of the 4 elemental kinds: Tao of earth, Jinni of air, Efreeti of fire, or Marid of water. They carry a magical genie's vessel, usually a lamp or a ring, which they can crawl inside as an extra-dimensional rest space. The Bard is a charisma-based caster who channels magic through performance, music, oratory, dance, dramatic monologues at inappropriate moments, whatever fits their style. Their signature feature is bardic inspiration, which lets them hand out a die that an ally can later add to an attack, check, or save. Because of their natural charisma, this makes them the party's social face, the one who's best suited to talk to nobles, charm innkeepers, and seduce literally everything that has a face, and several things that don't. The Bard is a lustful menace. At least that's the stereotype, but the ones I've played with have been quite tame, luckily. Jokes aside though, Bard is very fun, and if you like being dramatic and pulling off some mental things to get your party out of trouble, Bard is a great pick. Subclasses are called Bardic colleges. The College of Lore is the Scholar Bard, a wandering archivist who collects songs, secrets, and forbidden knowledge. They get cutting words, which lets them use a reaction to magically distract an enemy with an insult or a sour note. The College of Glamour is fey-touched and theatrical, drawing power from the alluring magic of the Feywild. They can grant temporary hit points and free movement to allies just by performing, charm whole crowds, and at higher levels project an aura of unearthly majesty that can literally make enemies bow to them. And the College of Swords is the duelist performer, fighting with blades the way other bards fight with words. They learn blade flourishes that add bonus damage and effects to their attacks, like a defensive spin that boosts their AC, or a slashing strike that hits a second enemy nearby. They're a bard who can hold their own in a frontline melee fight, while still casting spells and doing other typical bard stuff. The cleric is a divine spellcaster who draws power from a god, a pantheon, or a divine cause they've devoted themselves to. Their subclass is called a divine domain, and the domain shapes their flavor, their bonus spells, and what they can do with channel divinity, which is a recharging feature that lets clerics burn a charge to perform thematic divine acts. Clerics are the strongest dedicated healers in the game. Think of your iconic priest healer from RPG games, but don't write them off as just people in robes in the back. They're also genuinely scary in combat. The light domain is the Radiant Blaster, gifted with sun and fire magic. They get the light cantrip for free, can hurl a warding flare to magically blind an attacker and disrupt their swing, and pick up signature spells like Fireball and Daylight as bonus options on top of their normal cleric spell list. The Trickery domain is the mischievous, shadowy cleric of gods who favor stealth, lies, and chaos. They can use channel divinity to summon a duplicate of themselves that confuses enemies about which one is real. And they get spells like Disguise Self and Pass Without Trace, making them less of a holy priest, and instead you can think of them like a divine con artist. And the Death domain is for clerics serving gods of murder and undeath, who twist healing magic into harm and gain access to necromancy spells most clerics can't touch. Their Reaper feature lets them target 2 creatures at once with necromancy cantrips, and Channel Divinity, Touch of Death, lets them deal a brutal burst of necrotic damage on a melee hit. I really like that subclass because it's kind of like, what if the healer was the scariest person at the table? The Druid is a wisdom-based class who serves as a guardian of nature and primal forces. The most famous feature, and what I believe draws most people to the fantasy of the Druid, is Wild Shape, which lets them transform into animals, scaling from small beasts at low levels to powerful and terrifying creatures as they grow. Their subclasses are called circles. They're ancient orders or sects that gather to share knowledge, perform rituals, and pass down their traditions. So when a druid joins a certain circle, the in-world flavor is that they've been initiated into an order of druids. The Circle of the Land is the classic. A druid is bound to a specific kind of terrain, like forest, coast, mountain, or swamp, gaining bonus spells flavored to that environment, and a feature called Natural Recovery that lets them get spell slots back during a short rest, basically by sitting down and meditating on the land. The Circle of the Moon is for druids who live in deepest wilderness. Moon druids practically live in animal form, taking on the shape of dire wolves to hunt under starlight, becoming great bears to defend their groves, things like that. They draw their power from the moon itself, from the wild instinct it stirs in every living thing. And the longer they walk the path, the more monstrous and majestic the forms they can assume become. And the Circle of Spores is the weird, gross, fungal druid, devoted to the cycle of decay and rebirth. They get a feature called Symbiotic Entity that lets them spend a wild shape charge to surround themselves in a halo of toxic spores instead of transforming, gaining temporary hit points, and adding extra necrotic damage to their melee attacks. They can also use Halo of Spores as a reaction to deal necrotic damage to any creature that comes near them. And at higher levels, they can animate the corpses of fallen enemies as fungal zombies that follow them around, which is exactly as unsettling as it sounds. There's 2 melee classes to mention still. The Monk is a martial artist built around speed and discipline. It's the art of doing more damage with their bare hands than most people can do with a sword. They get free bonus action punches on top of their normal attacks. And they spend a resource called focus points on signature techniques. Flurry of blows adds extra strikes. Step of the wind lets them dash and disengage in one fluid motion. At higher levels, they can stun enemies with a single touch, run up walls, fall from great height without taking damage, and eventually move so quickly they get an entire extra turn when they need one. Subclasses are called monastic traditions. The way of the open hand is one of the traditions. It's the monk you picture when someone says the word. Disciplined, balanced, devoted to the perfection of the body as a weapon. And at the peak of the tradition, they learn quivering palm, where they touch an enemy, leave a hidden vibration inside them, and then days later, rupture that energy and deal massive damage to their target. It's quite overpowered, but I'll be honest though. Since this gets unlocked at level 17, most campaigns end way before that. But just something fun to know about the monk. The way of the drunken master is the unorthodox tradition. Monks who disguise their lethal training in staggering, weaving movements. They can redirect missed attacks into other enemies, slip past opportunity attacks like they're not even there, and counter incoming swings with one of their own. The flavor is pure wandering folk hero, like a cheerful drunk who walks into a bar fight and walks out without a scratch. And I saved the best for last. And by best, I mean my own favorite class, sorry. So the rogue is the sneaky one. The party member who solves problems with a knife in the dark instead of a sword in the open. Their signature feature is sneak attack, which adds a big pile of extra damage dice whenever they hit a target they have advantage against, or whenever an ally is right next to the target, distracting them. The damage scales really well as they level, so by mid-game, a single well-placed dagger from a hidden rogue can hit very, very hard. They also have cunning action, which lets them dash, hide, or disengage, making them difficult to pin down. Subclasses are called roguish archetypes. The thief is the cat burglar specialist, the guy or gal who's really good with locked doors and can pickpocket effectively. They can also climb walls pretty easily. The assassin is the cold one, the rogue trained as a killer for hire. Their whole kit is built around the first strike. They get advantage on anyone who hasn't acted yet in the fight, and any hit against a surprise target is automatically a critical hit, which means the opening blow of an ambush can delete an enemy before anyone draws a weapon. They also learn to forge identities convincingly enough to spend weeks pretending to be someone else. Really good for infiltrating noble courts and things of that nature. And the swashbuckler is the blade dancing duelist. They're very charismatic, so you need to think less sneaky in terms of like actual stealth and skullduggery, and more so very charming and witty, able to talk themselves out of trouble, or into it as well, I guess. So each class has a thing it's known for. Some of them are very typical, tropey archetypes, and some can literally change the entire class into something that almost feels like it should be its own thing. The classes are designed so that a balanced party of players can handle almost anything. And a lot of the fun of building a group is figuring out how everyone's strengths fit together. But don't worry, even if you don't have a full-on friend group and are hoping to just join a one-shot at your local games cafe, you're fine picking just about any class that is available for their campaign. So just choose whatever sounds the most fun or appealing from a class fantasy perspective. Alright, so now let's talk background. Your character's background is what they did before they were an adventurer, or at least before they got to the point you're about to start the campaign at. Were you a soldier, a criminal, a noble, an entertainer, a hermit? Each background gives you a couple of skill proficiencies, maybe a tool you know how to use, and a little narrative hook. A character with the sailor background knows how to navigate by the stars and probably has a friend in every port. A criminal background means you've got contacts in the underworld and you likely know your way around a lock. The mechanical bonuses are small, but the background gives you a hook for who your character was before everything started. It also adds a ton of flair and fun for who your character is, because some combinations make very obvious sense and go together naturally, but you can get really creative with it too. It all depends on how you want to play it. Just to present a few examples to get your ideas flowing, you could be something like a human charlatan rogue. Your character grew up running cons in city markets, forging signatures, selling fake relics to tourists, those kind of things. The charlatan background gives you deception and sleight of hand proficiency, plus a disguise kit and a forgery kit, which stacks perfectly with the rogue's natural skills. You're a no-frills criminal who lies for a living and stabs when lying stops working. Basic and fun. But you could also have a tiefling sailor warlock with the fathomless patron. You're a tiefling raised on the open sea, working the rigging of a merchant ship as a cabin boy or girl, until one terrible night they fell overboard during a storm, and something deep below the waves saved them. But of course, not without a price. Now they serve a patron from the crushing dark of the ocean floor. Mechanically, the sailor background gives you athletics and perception, plus a navigator's kit and free passage on most ships. The fathomless warlock gives you tentacle attacks and the ability to breathe underwater. The character would work so well in any campaign that goes near the coast or open water. So yeah, combine a race, a class, and a background, and you've got a character. A first-level dwarven cleric of the war god, who used to be a soldier, named, Bram Coppervein. Now he's wandering the countryside with a bunch of strangers, looking for a missing princess. That's a character. The rest is up to you and how the campaign plays out. Now that you hopefully have a character to picture, let me explain how a fight in D&D actually works. So when combat starts, the game shifts into a turn-based mode. Everyone rolls something called initiative, which is just a D20 plus your dexterity modifier. The DM ranks everyone from highest to lowest, and that's the order people take their turns in. So in a fight with 4 players and 3 goblins, you might end up with the bard going first, then a goblin, then the fighter, then 2 goblins, then the rogue, then the wizard, then loop back to the top. On your turn, you get a few different things you can do. You get 1 movement, which is usually 30 feet, although some species and classes are faster or slower. You can break that movement up however you like. Move 10 feet, swing a sword, move 20 more feet. It's something you'll learn to use strategically over time. You also get one action. An action is the big thing you do on your turn, and there's a bunch of options. You can attack. You can cast a spell. You can dash, which doubles your movement for that current turn. So like instead of attacking someone, you could dash, and now you've got 60 feet worth of movement to maybe run away, or reposition to somewhere more advantageous. You can disengage, which lets you walk away from someone without them getting a free hit on you. You can dodge, which makes you harder to hit by imposing disadvantage on attack rolls against you. You can hide. You can use an object like drinking a health potion. You can help an ally. There's a whole list, and you pick one. On top of your action, you also get something called a bonus action. A bonus action is exactly what it sounds like. A small extra thing you can do on the same turn, in addition to your normal stuff. The catch is that you only get one bonus action per turn, and you can only use it if a specific feature, spell, or ability tells you it costs a bonus action. So you can't just freely tack on a second attack because you feel like it. You need something on your character sheet that explicitly grants you a bonus action option. So a few common examples. A fighter using 2 weapons can swing the offhand weapon as a bonus action. Some spells, like Healing Word or Spiritual Weapon, are cast as a bonus action instead of a normal action, which means a spellcaster can fire off a bonus action spell and still cast a regular spell on the same turn. And rogues have a feature called Cunning Action, which lets them dash, hide, or disengage as a bonus action, which is a huge part of why rogues are so slippery in a fight. While everyone else has to choose between attacking and repositioning, a rogue can do both. You also have something called a reaction, which is one thing you can do off your turn in response to a specific trigger. Reactions are the game's way of letting you act when the action isn't currently on you. The most common reaction is an opportunity attack, which is a free melee swing you get when an enemy within reach tries to move away from you. The reasoning is that you're trained for combat and you take advantage of openings, so if someone turns their back on you mid-fight, you get a swing at them. Reactions cover other things too, though. A wizard can use a reaction to cast Shield and magically deflect an attack mid-swing. A sorcerer can use a reaction to cast Counterspell, interrupting an enemy's spell as they're casting it. You only get one reaction per round, and it resets at the start of your next turn. So once you've used it, you're out until then. That's more or less the structure of a turn. Move, action, maybe a bonus action, with a reaction available off turn. It's, I guess, kind of like a chess game, but where you're only controlling one character instead of all the pieces on the board. Okay, so when you attack, you make an attack roll, which is your way of finding out whether the swing actually landed. You pick up your D20, roll it, and add some numbers to whatever shows up. That total is compared to the enemy's AC, and if you meet or beat their AC, you hit. The numbers you add to the D20 are what people call your attack bonus. It's a small, easy equation made of 2 things. The first is how physically suited you are to using the weapon. If you're swinging a sword, that's your strength. But if you're shooting a bow or using something like a rapier, That's your dexterity. I'll use an example. If your strength score is 16, your modifier is +3, and that +3 gets added to your roll. The second is whether your character was actually trained to use that weapon, which the game tracks with your proficiency bonus. That's a flat number that starts at +2 at low levels and grows as you level up. A fighter trained with swords adds it. A wizard picking up a sword for the first time doesn't. So when a fighter with a strength of 16 swings a longsword, they roll a d20 and add 5. 3 from strength, 2 from proficiency. If the d20 comes up 15, the total is 20. And against an enemy with an AC of 16, that's a clean hit. Then damage is a separate roll. Each weapon has its own die. A longsword uses a d8. You roll the d8 to find out how much damage you did, and you add your strength modifier to that roll, which, yes, is that same strength modifier we just discussed. The logical reasoning for that is because hitting harder comes from the same muscle that helped you connect. You don't add your proficiency bonus to damage though, because proficiency only helps you land the swing, not hit harder. So that fighter's damage is d8 plus 3. Roll the d8, get a 5, add your 3. The goblin takes 8 damage and falls over. That's the whole loop. d20 plus your attack bonus to see if you hit. Weapon die plus your ability modifier to see how much damage you do. If you score a critical hit, which means your d20 die landed on that beautiful natural 20, you roll your damage dice twice and add them together. Then add your modifier once. So a longsword crit is 2d8s plus 3. It's in my experience one of the most satisfying things you can have happen. Unfortunately, monsters can crit too. And watching the DM grin when they roll a natural 20 against your character is one of the small horrors of the hobby. Let me talk about spells, because magic is a huge part of D&D, and the system is just complicated enough to have it work differently than your melee combat. Spellcasters, your wizards, sorcerers, clerics, druids, bards, warlocks, and to an extent paladins, can cast spells. Spells do a wide variety of things. They damage enemies, they heal friends, they summon creatures, they teleport you, they let you talk to dead people, they let you turn invisible, and so on. To cast spells, most casters use spell slots. Think of a spell slot as a charge. You have a limited number of them per day, and casting a spell uses 1. Spell slots come in different levels, from 1 to 9, with higher level slots being able to power more powerful spells. A first level wizard might have 2 spell slots of first level, and that's it. By the time they're a 10th level wizard, they have a whole bunch of slots across multiple levels, and they can cast some pretty insane things. So you could start off with powerful but relatively tame spells, like magic missiles and fireball, eventually get polymorph, where you can turn a formidable enemy into a turtle. Keep going up in level, and you can stop time itself for a bit, send down a meteor shower. Again, most campaigns don't go on long enough to get to the stupidly OP stuff, but still cool. The good news is, casters also have something called cantrips, which I briefly mentioned earlier. Cantrips are level 0 spells. They don't use spell slots, and you can cast them as much as you want. A wizard's firebolt, which is a tiny dart of flame, is a cantrip. A cleric's sacred flame is a cantrip. Cantrips are your spammable, all-day magic options. And they generally do less damage than weapons, but have neat secondary effects, like setting things on fire or pushing people back. Or summon a magical mage hand that can do stuff like letting you light candles dramatically from across a room, or pulling a lever that's out of reach. A lot of cantrips have great uses outside of combat. It's why I find them so fun when I want to change from my rogue. Spells can take a normal action to cast, or a bonus action, or even a reaction in some cases, like the famous counterspell, which lets you, on someone else's turn, interrupt their casting and shut down their spell. There's also a thing called concentration I want to bring up, because it trips up basically every new caster. A lot of the bigger, longer-lasting spells in the game require concentration, which means the caster has to keep their focus on the spell to keep it active. You can only concentrate on one spell at a time, so casting a second concentration spell drops the first one. And if you take damage while concentrating, you have to make a Constitution saving throw with a DC of 10 or half the damage dealt, whichever is higher. Fail it, and the spell drops. This is the reason your wizard casts a spell to hold the boss in place, gets clipped by an arrow on the next turn, fails the save, and the boss is suddenly free again. Oh yeah, and the DM might also decide that certain environmental events, such as a wave crashing over you while you're on a ship in a storm, requires you to succeed on a Constitution saving throw to maintain concentration on a spell. Concentration is a huge part of how combat balance actually works, and it's the reason spellcasters try very hard not to get hit. But normal activity, such as moving and attacking, doesn't interfere with concentration. In order to get your spell slots back, you have to rest. So most parties try to take a long rest, which is 8 hours of sleep, every in-game day. There's also a thing called a short rest, which is a 1-hour break where some classes can recover some abilities, like warlocks getting their spell slots back because they're special, and players can heal a little. Short rests are about an hour. Long rests are about 8. Long and short rests are a good way of pacing yourself too, getting an idea of in-game time and marking important milestones you achieved that day. Like, say your adventuring party just got done clearing out a dungeon of undead and found the lost amulet that the king's advisor tasked them with retrieving. It's more than likely that your frontline fighters have taken some heavy damage, and your casters have burned through their spell slots. It would be a good idea to take a long rest at that point, once you return to the safety of the kingdom's walls, in preparation for the next stage of your journey. Or if your group has been on the road for several hours, had a small skirmish with the wolves or local bandits, and then your ranger spots a caravan suspiciously blocking the road ahead. You could assume this is a good spot to take a short rest to prepare for a possible ambush or some conflict coming up. It's all situational and depends on the overall state of your party. I also like to use rests as a way to focus on the non-combat side of things. Like maybe your cleric is hiding a secret, something tragic or dangerous as part of their backstory. They take the first watch on a long rest, keeping an eye out while camping in the mountains. Your barbarian can't sleep for whatever reason, so they take a seat by the cleric, and it opens up an opportunity for those two characters to bond and add some narrative complexity to their dynamic. By talking under the moonlight, sharing secrets in a moment of vulnerability that they wouldn't have otherwise had, if all they were doing was going from shop to shop, quest after quest. But back to the logistical benefits of resting for a second. Healing is a big motivator to rest, and healing in general is very important in D&D. After all, if your character dies, it's game over for you. Your DM might let you roll a new character to continue the campaign, but it always sucks really bad, losing a character you've formed an attachment to over the weeks, months, maybe even years you've played them. So let's talk hit points. Hit points are the abstract measure of how much punishment and injury your character can take before they go down. They aren't quite physical health, like in most video games. They're a mix of stamina, luck, willpower, and actual injury. A first-level character usually has somewhere between 7 and 15 hit points, depending on class. By the time you're at high levels, you can have over 100. When you take damage, you subtract it from your current hit points. When you hit 0, you're not dead. You're knocked unconscious and dying, and can make something called death saving throws to see if you actually die or come back from the brink. You roll a d20 at the start of your turn with no modifiers added. A roll of 10 or higher is a success. 9 or lower is a fail. Your character stabilizes with 3 successful rolls or dies at 3 failures. A natural 20 heals you back up to 1 hit point immediately, but a natural 1 counts as 2 failures, which is brutal. Death saves are pretty tense, but when your character is not at death's door, healing comes in clutch. Clerics, druids, paladins, bards, all have healing magic. Cure Wounds is the basic healing spell. You touch a creature, and they regain hit points. Healing potions exist as a backup, and taking a long rest restores all your hit points, so characters do recover, just not always in the moment. Leveling up is the long-term progression. Whenever the party completes adventures and earns experience points, or in many games, just hits a story milestone the DM has decided is worthwhile, characters go up a level. Levels go from 1 to 20. Each level, you get more hit points. Sometimes a new feature from your class, and at certain levels, you get to improve your ability scores or pick a feat, which is a special little bonus ability. Going from level 3 to level 4 is where most characters really start to feel like the heroes they're going to become. By level 20, you are functionally a demigod, and most campaigns never even reach that point. A lot of people don't even find it fun being that powerful. It's pretty immersion breaking in my opinion as well. Most games end somewhere between level 10 and 15. To give you a sense of what level 20 actually means, there's a creature in the standard D&D monster book called the Tarrasque. It's basically the D&D version of Godzilla. A kaiju-sized, nearly indestructible enemy with an AC of 25 and over 600 hit points. It's the kind of thing that only a fully geared level 20 party has any hope of fighting. If a Tarrasque shows up in your campaign, your DM either loves you and wants to give you the fight of your life, or hates you guys so bad and wants to kill you. Equipment is also a thing. Characters carry weapons, armor, packs, rope, torches, rations, bedrolls, all the stuff you'd expect. Most classes start with a default equipment package based on their class and background. For example, a level 1 wizard with the sage background starts with a quarterstaff, or a dagger if you want to choose that instead, an arcane focus, a spellbook of their starting spells, a quill and ink, a small knife, and a letter from a dead colleague posing a question they never got to answer, and a set of common clothes. There's a currency system based on copper, silver, gold, and platinum. Most prices are in gold pieces. A nice meal costs a few silver. A magic sword can cost thousands of gold if you can find one being sold. Magic items are scattered throughout the world, ranging from minor stuff like a cloak that makes you a little harder to see, to artifact tier items that can resurrect the dead or destroy a city. The DM controls what you find, and good DMs sprinkle in interesting items that play to the strengths and quirks of each character. You get these by exploring and finding rare items and gear, buying them off merchants, obtaining them as quest rewards or as loot drops from enemies you've defeated. Now let's talk about the part of the game that isn't combat. Because honestly, a lot of D&D, often most of it, isn't fighting. In fact, my least favorite part is the combat. There's roleplay, exploration, puzzle solving, and social strategizing. In my opinion, it's way more fun when the bard is trying to convince a guard that yes, they are absolutely 100% the new royal pastry chef, and please let them into the kitchens. Or maybe the wizard examining an ancient inscription on a wall to decipher a century-old prophecy. I prefer that to the fighter knocking the guard out or something. Don't get me wrong though, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way to play the game. In fact, it shines the most when you do a bit of everything. It's not fun for the group if the only one doing anything is the rogue infiltrating and deceiving their way to the end of a story arc. But it's also not fun if the barbarian becomes a murder hobo and just kills any obstacles in the way of your goal. Each player and character has a role to play, and a good DM will give everyone at the table a chance to shine, and a story segment that plays to their strengths. The fighter gets a fight, the bard gets a banquet, the rogue gets a heist, the wizard gets a library full of secrets. A typical session might have, say, 3 or 4 hours of play, and out of that, maybe 1 hour is combat. The rest is the group walking through a city and asking questions, or interrogating a captured cultist, or trying to figure out the politics of a kingdom they've just stumbled into, or having a long, rambling conversation with a tavern keeper about her missing son. This is the part of the game that surprises people. They expect dungeon crawling, monster slaying, and they do get all that, for sure. But they also get a lot of, hey, what if we just spent 45 minutes shopping for boots and stumbled on a small mystery side quest along the way? This is also where the game gets the most personal. Some players love roleplay. You really don't have to if you're shy or still warming up to it. I was really nervous to do a cowboy-type accent when I played my lawless-type rogue, so for the first while, I just skipped the whole roleplay bit. But for those of you braver than I and want to jump right into it, people love that stuff. They want to be in character, do voices, write soliloquies for their tragic backstory. Other players prefer combat and tactics. They want to optimize their builds, position perfectly, and crit a hobgoblin in the throat. Now that we've covered all this stuff, I'm sure you're like, bloody hell, that's a lot. So let me walk you through an example of a very simple session, just so you can see how all this fits together. Picture a party of 4, a human paladin named Sir Perinold, sworn to the god of mercy, traveling the countryside doing penance for a terrible act he committed by accident. A half-elf bard named Ellis, drifting from town to town, performing songs for meager coin. A tiefling wizard named Vex, recently expelled from a magical college for reasons she'd rather not discuss. This is potentially something we'll learn about as the campaign progresses, and she opens up to her companions. And a halfling rogue called Tibbs, who is, by his own description, a freelance acquisitions specialist, which is what he calls being a thief. Before any of this happens, the DM has done their homework. They've sketched out a town, drawn a rough map, decided who lives there and what's wrong, written down some monster stats, picked a few key points of interest where the players might find a secret quest or an important item, or meet someone of note, all kinds of narrative beats, and picked a hook to draw the players in. None of this is improvised on the night. Most DMs spend at least a couple hours prepping before a session, sometimes more for the first one, or when they're gearing up for a major event. What gets improvised is everything the players do once they show up, which is usually most of it. Let's say the town is called Hollowdale. It's a small, damp settlement nestled between a pine forest and a lengthy river. The kind of place where everyone has their secrets and skeletons in the closet. The inn has 1 good room and 3 bad ones, and most people never think to visit twice. It's just wholly unremarkable. Well, until now. The 4 characters arrive separately for separate reasons. Sir Perinold rides in at dusk, his armor caked in road mud, looking for a hot meal and a chapel to pray in. Ellis has been here for 2 days already, performing nightly at the tavern in exchange for room and board, and is starting to suspect that something in town is very, very wrong. Vex has come specifically because she heard a rumor that someone in Hollowdale has been seen casting magic that doesn't belong here. And she wants to find out more. And Tibbs is passing through with a bag of things he stole in the last town, looking for a fence and a quiet night to lay low. The session opens in the tavern. The DM describes the room. Low ceilings, warm fire, a handful of locals nursing their drinks and not making eye contact. Ellis is on a small wooden stage at the back, halfway through a song. Sir Perinold walks in, removes his helmet, and asks the innkeeper for a room. Vex is already at the bar, nursing a glass and making faces at the taste of cheap alcohol. Tibbs slips in through the side door and tries to be inconspicuous. This is the part of the session where the players introduce their characters to each other. Some tables do this in character, with the bard striking up a conversation, the rogue trying to pick the paladin's pocket, the wizard rolling her eyes at all of them. Other tables just narrate, like, my character sits at the bar, my character is in the corner, and skip the formal introductions. I'll give you 2 examples of how this could play out. Like, let's say your good buddy Tom from high school is the guy playing Sir Perinold. He might drop his voice deeper, sit up a little straighter in his chair, and say something like, I push open the tavern door and step inside, rolling my shoulder where the pauldron's been digging in all day. It's been a long week on the road. I scan the room for a quiet corner. When the food comes, I bow my head, say a quiet prayer, and start eating, keeping a vigilant watch over the room. Or he might just say, Sir Perinold goes into the tavern, chills in the corner and minds his business. Either is fine, just depends on the comfort level of people and the table dynamics. Ellis, ever the social one, decides he wants free ale from the barmaid. The DM asks Ellis for a charisma persuasion check. Ellis is a bard with a charisma of 18, which gives him a +4 modifier, and his character sheet already shows that +4 written next to his charisma score, because he did the math once when he made the character. On top of that, he's proficient in persuasion, which adds his +2 proficiency bonus. 4 + 2 is 6, which is the number written next to persuasion on his sheet. So he doesn't have to do any math at the table. He just reads it. He rolls a d20, gets a 14, adds his 6, total 20. The DM decides the DC was 18, since the barmaid is tired and the bard is a stranger. 20 beats 18. Free ale acquired. Tibbs, meanwhile, is doing what rogues do. He's watching the room. He tells the DM he wants to scan the tavern for anyone who looks out of place. The DM asks for a wisdom perception check. Tibbs is a halfling rogue with a wisdom score of 14, which gives him a +2 modifier written next to his wisdom on his character sheet. He didn't take perception as one of his skill proficiencies at character creation, since he focused on stealth, sleight of hand, acrobatics, and deception instead. So he doesn't add his proficiency bonus to this roll. He rolls a d20, gets a 6, adds his +2 for a total of 8. The DM had set the DC at 15 for spotting the cloaked figure, since the figure has been deliberately staying out of view in a dim corner. 8 isn't even close, so it's a fail. The DM doesn't tell Tibbs anything outright wrong, but they don't tell him the truth either. The tavern looks normal, they say. So Ellis sips his drink and stays alert, but he hasn't noticed the cloaked figure in the corner who has been watching the four of them. Then the innkeeper, a stout woman with circles under her eyes, comes over to refill drinks and quietly mentions, almost in passing, that 3 children have gone missing in the last week. The first was the blacksmith's daughter. The second was a farmhand's boy. The third was found by his own father this morning, asleep in his bed. Except he wasn't asleep in the normal sense. More so in a trance, and he wouldn't wake up. The mayor has put up a reward for anyone willing to look into it. 20 gold for information. 50 if they bring whoever's responsible back alive. That's how a story hook works in D&D. The DM already knew about the missing kids when they wrote the adventure last week, but the players aren't reading it off a screen. They're hearing it from a tired innkeeper who's been carrying that worry around all week. The information comes in through a conversation, and if the party had finished their meals and gone to bed without talking to anyone, the DM would have had to find another way to surface it. Maybe a scream outside the window an hour later. Maybe a parent banging on doors at dawn. The hook is the thing the DM is committed to, but the delivery is improvised based on what the players actually do. So Perinold speaks up first, because of course he does. He's a paladin, and kids are missing. Typical good guy to the rescue. Ellis pipes in next. He's been running low on material for his ballads and songs, and this seems like a real opportunity to write about an epic adventure of daring rescue and heroic deeds. Vex is interested because the part about the boy in the trance who wouldn't wake up sounds like magic she recognizes, and she wants a closer look. And Tibbs, who has been quiet up until now, asks how much the reward was. Again, here's 50 gold, and decides it's better than spending the next few weeks picking pockets. The four of them push their chairs together and order another round of drinks. They agree to investigate together, and the party has formed. They just start talking about what they know, what they think it might be, and where they should start looking in the morning. Sometimes a DM will gently nudge a reluctant player by giving their character a personal reason to care, like a missing kid being a distant cousin, or a clue that ties into their backstory. Over the next hour of play, the party splits up to investigate. Ellis goes back to the tavern in the morning to talk to the regulars, since people tend to gossip more around a charming, familiar face. He buys a round for an old woodcutter and succeeds in a persuasion check, so the woodcutter tells him that he saw the blacksmith's daughter the afternoon she disappeared, and Ellis learns that she'd been picking herbs at the tree line before she vanished. Sir Perinold, meanwhile, goes with the wizard to visit the home of the boy who wouldn't wake up. The father answers the door with hollowed-out eyes. It's clear he hasn't slept in 2 days and can barely speak. He leads them upstairs to the boy's room, where the child lies in his bed, breathing shallowly, skin cold to the touch, lips faintly blue. Sir Perinold kneels beside the bed and offers a prayer to his god. He places one armored hand gently on the boy's forehead and casts Lay on Hands, a paladin spell that lets him channel divine healing into someone he touches. Mechanically, he has a pool of healing he can spend each day, and he chooses to spend 15 points of it on the boy, which is enough to fully heal any normal wound. The DM nods and gives his blessing. The spell kinda works. Golden light flickers around Sir Perinold's palm, and the boy's breathing steadies for a moment. The father gasps and steps forward, feeling hopeful. And then suddenly the light fades, and the boy is exactly as he was before. Cold skin, blue lips. His breathing is still shallow. The healing didn't do anything. But Fox, you might say, Sir Perinold didn't fail his role. He didn't fail anything at all. The mechanic worked exactly as it was supposed to, but the DM has already decided behind the scenes that whatever is happening to this boy isn't a wound. Maybe it's a curse, maybe a hex, and you can't heal that with regular healing any more than you can mop up a leak without fixing the pipe. The DM isn't being unfair, not at all. The world is just telling the player, through the result, that this is bigger than a first-level spell can fix. There's a story here, a mystery to be solved. A successful roll doesn't always solve the problem, but it can tell you what kind of problem you're actually dealing with. Vex is less concerned with the emotional weight of the scene, so she leans in over the boy and casts a cantrip called Detect Magic. Detect Magic is one of the most useful spells in the game, especially at low levels. It lets the caster sense the presence and school of any magic within 30 feet for up to 10 minutes. They have to concentrate on it, which means they can't cast other spells that require concentration at the same time. But in a quiet room like this, it's an easy thing to maintain. Vex closes her eyes, takes a slow breath, and reaches out with her senses. She feels something almost immediately, a faint trace of magic clinging to the boy like a second skin. It's dark and wrong. The DM tells her that she recognizes the magic as necromancy, the school of death and decay, and that whatever it is, it's not finished with the boy yet. Tibbs, while all this is happening, has been doing his own thing. He's gone to the edge of the woods where the blacksmith's daughter was last seen, on his own, because he doesn't really do crying parents and drama. he searches the ground for tracks. The DM asks for a wisdom check of survival or perception. Tibbs isn't proficient in survival, but he rolls anyway, gets a 13, adds his wisdom modifier of +2 for a total of 15. The DM had set the DC at 12. He tells Tibbs that he finds a partial boot print in the soft dirt, much too large for a child, and a small smudge of something dark and oily that the rain almost washed away. He scoops a bit of it onto a leaf and pockets it to show the wizard. The party regroups at the tavern in the afternoon to share what they've found. The picture is starting to come together. Someone, an adult, has been taking the children without a struggle. And there's magic involved, the kind of magic that nobody local would know how to use. Vex examines the dark smudge from Tibbs's leaf, casts detect magic on it, and feels the same cold echo she felt over the boy. The DM might ask for an investigation check here from everyone. They succeed and determine that it's definitely from the same source. Whatever did this to the boy left a trail when it took the children, and that trail leads back to the trees. They leave town an hour before dusk, following the smudge through the underbrush, tracing the faint trail of magic that Vex is focused on. Ellis sings quietly to himself, partly to keep his nerves down, partly because he's already composing a song about this grand adventure they're on. The path winds deeper, the trees grow closer together, the light dims, and eventually, just before full dark, they find a cave. Tibbs goes first because he's the sneakiest. He rolls stealth, gets a 22 with his bonuses, and slips inside without making a sound. He sees 3 skeletons standing motionless around a glowing altar, and behind it, a figure in a heavy black robe, with their hood drawn up, performing some kind of ritual over a sleeping child curled at their feet. It's the blacksmith's daughter, and she's still alive. Tibbs creeps back out and reports what he's seen. The party makes a plan to launch a surprise attack. The wizard will open with crowd control. The paladin will charge the robed figure. The bard will hang back and support, buffing bardic inspiration on whoever needs it most. Tibbs will get into flanking position and look for an opening where his sneak attack will hit hardest. They go in and combat starts. Initiative is rolled. Everyone rolls a d20, adds their dexterity modifier, and the DM ranks the order. Vex the wizard rolls highest, so she goes first. She casts a spell called Sleep, which rolls some dice to determine how many hit points worth of creatures fall unconscious in a small radius. Skeletons, it turns out, are immune to sleep because they're undead and don't actually sleep to begin with. Oops. That's alright though, mistakes are really common in D&D, and as a new player, you'll make plenty as you learn, so don't worry about it. But hey, luckily, a cultist guard the party hadn't seen, tucked behind a rock formation, drops snoring to the ground. One enemy down before he ever got to act. Sometimes unpredictable stuff happens, and it can be really good or really bad. In this case, it worked out. Sir Perinold goes next. He charges in, sword drawn, shield raised, and swings at the nearest skeleton. He rolls a 15 on the d20, adds his +5 attack bonus that he reads off his character sheet, for a total of 20. The skeleton's AC is 13. It's a hit. He rolls damage, a d8 +3 for his strength, and slams the skeleton hard enough that its skull pops off and rolls across the cave floor. Ellis the Bard goes next. He uses his bonus action to cast Bardic Inspiration on Tibbs, handing him a die that Tibbs can later add to a roll. Then Ellis casts a cantrip called Vicious Mockery at one of the remaining skeletons, hurling a magical insult so cutting that even a creature with no soul finds it hurtful. The person playing Ellis can either just simply say, "I cast Vicious Mockery," and leave it at that, or they can make up an insult if they want to for fun. Maybe they lean into the roleplay and say, "You're quite ugly, even for a corpse." If the skeleton fails their wisdom saving throw, which the DM rolls, it takes psychic damage and now has disadvantage on its next attack. Tibbs moves into position behind one of the remaining skeletons, using the wizard and paladin as a distraction. He attacks with his dagger, rolls a 16, hits easily, and triggers his sneak attack class feature, rolling extra damage dice on top of his weapon damage. The skeleton crumples into a pile of bones. Then it's the robed figure's turn. He turns slowly and raises a hand, and the air in the cave begins to crackle with cold green light. He's casting something big. Vex doesn't have anything that can stop the spell. Counterspell is a 3rd level wizard spell, and she's level 1. She's barely got 2 1st-level slots to her name, so instead of stopping it, she does the only thing she can. She uses her reaction to cast Shield, a level 1 spell that snaps a barrier of magical force around her for a moment, giving her a sudden +5 to her AC until her next turn. She doesn't know what's about to hit her, but she knows she'd rather not eat it head-on. The robed figure finishes the spell. A bead of fire streaks from his palm, lands in the middle of the cave as it detonates. The spell was Fireball. A 3rd-level spell, and dealing a hefty 8d6 fire damage in a 20-foot radius. Everyone in the blast zone has to make a dexterity saving throw. Succeeding takes half damage, failing takes the full hit. The paladin makes his save and takes half. The rogue makes his and takes half. The bard fails and takes the full force of the blast, dropping to 4 hit points and barely staying on his feet. Vex, who is technically inside the blast radius but is currently wrapped in her shield spell, gets a small mercy from the timing. Shield doesn't help against Fireball directly, since Fireball isn't an attack roll, but the DM, feeling generous and noting that she committed her reaction the moment the casting started, lets her contribute to dodging on her own save. She rolls anyway, but oof, she fails. The fire washes over her and she drops to 2 hit points. The fight is suddenly very serious. So you see how this works. Every roll has a purpose. The dice generate moments. The robed figure could have killed the bard outright if a few rolls had gone differently. There's a real tension to it, because the dice can swing wildly, and you genuinely don't know what's going to happen next. The DM doesn't even fully know. They're improvising on top of their notes, and the story is being made in real time by everyone at the table. That session might end with the party victorious, or it might end with them barely escaping with their lives, or it might end with one of them dead, dramatically, in their friend's arms. It could be that they solve that particular mystery there and save the town's children. Or they could find something, a clue that takes it deeper and uncovers a conspiracy at the heart of this town. Depends on how long the campaign is, if it's a one-shot or a months-long endeavor. Let me give you a taste of some of the most well-known campaigns and modules, because part of what makes the hobby fun is that there are pre-made stories you can play through. So these are like full adventures written and published by Wizards of the Coast, with maps, NPCs, treasure, story beats, all of it laid out for the DM to run. You buy the book, you read it, and you have weeks or months of game material ready to go. A really good beginner-friendly adventure is probably Lost Mine of Phandelver. The classic version is basically perfect for new players. You've got goblins ambushing you on the road within the first 10 minutes of session 1. A missing dwarf who was your party's employer. A sleepy frontier town called Phandalin under the thumb of a local gang. A ruined wizard tower, a haunted manor, and a lost dwarven mine at the heart of it all. The whole adventure takes a party, from level 1 to level 5, over maybe 10 to 15 sessions, which is the perfect arc to teach you the game. So if you find a DM willing to run that, it'll be awesome. Oh, I just want to give some quick context before I continue. Most of D&D's official published adventures take place in a setting called the Forgotten Realms, which is the default published world of D&D. It's a sprawling continent called Faerun, with cities like Waterdeep, Baldur's Gate, and Neverwinter. And it's the world that most of the actual play shows, video games like Baldur's Gate 3, and most of the published adventures are set in. There are other official settings too, like Eberron, Dragonlance, Ravenloft, and Spelljammer. But if someone says D and doesn't specify, they almost certainly mean the Forgotten Realms. Some adventures sit in their own sealed-off corners of the multiverse, though, like the one I'm about to mention next. For something darker, there's Curse of Strahd, which is a gothic horror campaign set in a misty, vampire-haunted region called Barovia. Barovia is sealed off from the rest of the world by a permanent fog, trapping the party in a tiny corner of reality ruled by a single vampire. Strahd von Zarovich, the vampire lord, is genuinely a phenomenal villain. He's a tragic figure, a fallen man who sold his soul for love centuries ago and now haunts his own kingdom. He's also intelligent, charming, and personally invested in the players. He'll show up at your dinner. He'll write you letters. He'll waltz with a character at a ball. He's so much worse than just a guy you fight at the end. The campaign has an oppressive, dread-soaked tone that really appeals to me. I'd really like to play that one someday. There's Tomb of Annihilation, which is a jungle hex crawl with dinosaurs and a death curse. There's Storm King's Thunder, where giants are at war and the players get caught in the middle. There's Out of the Abyss, which sends the party into the Underdark, which is the giant cave system below the world, full of mind-controlling aberrations and demons. Before we finish this video off, I just want to take a super quick sec to discuss the rise of actual play shows, because I think it's a huge part of why D&D is having its current cultural moment. Critical Role is the big one. It's something I literally watch every week, religiously. It's basically a group of voice actors playing D&D, streamed live, with multi-year campaigns full of intense roleplay and emotional payoff. The voice actors are huge names in the industry. I can easily bet you that likely any piece of media you've consumed when it comes to video games or anime has at least one of these guys or gals in it. Especially the DM, Matt Mercer. There's also The Adventure Zone, a podcast that started as kind of a goof and turned into a genuinely heartfelt fantasy story. Dimension 20, with shorter, more focused seasons in wildly creative settings. like a high school where everyone is a fantasy creature. These shows have done more to bring people into the hobby than any marketing campaign ever could, because they show what the game looks like when it's played well, and by people who care. The thing they all show, by the way, the thing that surprises people who only know Dungeons and Dragons from the dice and the spells, and like the stupid satanic panic around it from the 80s, is that the game can be genuinely emotional. Characters who started as jokes become beloved. Real-life friendships form. The stakes are imaginary, but I can tell you this much, the feelings definitely aren't. Okay, so you've made it this far into the video. You may be wondering, alright Fox, I'm sold. I like the cool tieflings with the horns and the blue skin, and I really want to swing a big old sword at some goblins. But how do I actually start? Here's the practical answer. You need 3 things: people to play with, including someone willing to DM, the rules, and something to play. And by that, I mean an adventure or a starter campaign. That's it. Physical dice are nice to have, sure, but you can roll them in an app, and the starter set comes with a full set anyway. Everything else is optional. Let's look at those in order. Finding people is the hardest part of starting. Some are lucky enough to have friends who are already into it. But if you don't, your local game store is a great first stop. Most have bulletin boards or scheduled D&D nights for new players. That's actually how I joined my most recent group, which is also my 3rd ever D&D campaign, and I've made a couple of really good friends out of it. Online, there are virtual tabletops like Roll20 and Foundry, with built-in tools for running games, and so many Discord servers full of people looking for players. Now, somewhere inside your group, you also need a DM. If someone's willing to run the game, you're set. If nobody is, consider being one yourself. Yes, I know. That sounds terrifying, because I just spent like 2 hours going over how the DM has to know everything. But here's a secret I left until the end to weed out the weak. They actually don't. They just need to know a little more than the players, and they can learn alongside everyone else. The starter set is designed to teach you. The community is full of free advice. There are like entire YouTube channels dedicated to helping new DMs. If you have a creative streak, if you like making up stories and voicing weird characters, you might really love it. The game needs more DMs. Always. One last thing on the group front. A lot of tables these days run something called a session 0 before the campaign starts. It's a meeting, usually an hour or 2, where everyone sits down and talks about the game before any actual playing happens. What's the tone gonna be, gritty or heroic? What kind of content is everyone okay with? What's off limits? How often is the group meeting? What does everyone want their character to be? I think it's good practice because it heads off a lot of awkwardness later. Like some people don't want their character romanced by any of the other player characters, and it's much easier and way less awkward to have that conversation now than mid-scene. On the rules, the current standard is the 5th edition of D&D, usually shortened to 5e, which has been the dominant edition since 2014, with a major revision in 2024. There are 3 core books. The Player's Handbook, which has the rules for making and playing a character. The Dungeon Master's Guide for the person running the game. And the Monster Manual, which is full of, well, monsters. You don't strictly have to own any of them to play. Most groups share a single copy of the Player's Handbook between everyone. Wizards of the Coast also has free basic rules available online, and there's an official digital platform called D and D Beyond that lets you build characters, manage your sheet, and look up spells from your phone or laptop. The free tier is enough to get a beginner started, with paid content unlocking the full rulebooks if you want to go deeper. I personally use the free version for every character I've ever made, and have never felt the need to pay for the full thing. And I find it way easier than flipping back and forth through pages at the table. But if you're going to commit to the hobby long term, the Player's Handbook is the single most useful book you can own. And then, something to play. This is where the starter set comes in, and it's a very good value purchase in the hobby. For around 20 to 30 bucks or something like that, you get a beginner-friendly adventure, simplified rules, pre-made characters, and yes, a full set of dice. The current one is Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, and it's designed to teach the game while you play it. If you want to dip a toe in, that's the entry point. When you do start playing, here's some advice that goes beyond the rules. Be kind to your fellow players. The game is a collaborative thing. Don't hog the spotlight. Don't undercut other people's moments. If the bard is having a beautiful, tearful scene with the orphan they saved, this is not your time to make a joke. Oh, also, take notes, even just a little notebook with names and places. Future you will thank present you when, 12 sessions in, the DM mentions, "Oh, you remember Lord Velis of the Ember Court, of course." And you do not, in fact, remember Lord Velis, but if you wrote his name down with a little doodle of his stupid mustache and the general vibe the guy had, you can fake it. Lean into your character. The first time you do a voice, it'll feel weird. The second time, less weird. By session 10, you will have stopped being self-conscious and will simply be a tiny gnome named Wibble who hates those nasty tall elves. And finally, don't worry about doing it right. There is no right way to play D&D. There are tables that go heavy on rules and combat. There are tables that mostly do roleplay and never touch a sword. There are tables that exist somewhere in between. All of these are cool. The only real rule is everyone at the table having fun? If yes, you're playing it correctly. There's actually a long-standing sort of unofficial rule called Rule 0, which basically says that the most important rule of D&D is that the DM is the final arbiter, and the rules can always be bent, ignored, or rewritten for the sake of fun. The Player's Handbook itself acknowledges this. If a rule isn't making the game better, the table can change it. So don't get too hung up on getting every little mechanic right when you start out. So that's it. That's D&D. A beautiful, fundamentally weird hobby where anyone from teens to adults sit around tables and pretend to be wizards, creepy warlocks, and bards and brooding rangers with troubled pasts. It's been around for 50 years. Millions of people play it. It produces stories you'll remember for the rest of your life. It teaches you to think creatively, to collaborate, to take risks, escape the real world for a bit. If you've been on the fence about trying it, this is your sign. Find a group. Read the rules, or don't. Just show up with whatever you retained from this video and learn. Most people will be happy to show you the ropes right then and there. Make a character that you feel connected to. Roll a 20. Roll a 1. Get into a fight with a bandit. Fall in love with a moon goddess. Lose a friend to a dragon. Get them resurrected 3 sessions later. Spend 40 minutes shopping for boots. That's the game. Go play and have fun. But that's it for tonight, friends. I hope you learned something from this, and that it gave you some confidence to get into D and D. Until next time, stay safe. May the dice be ever in your favor, and sweet dreams.